Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Conversations to Innovate, powered by the Innovated Trust. For those joining us for the very first time, I'd love to give you just a little bit of background about who the Innovated Trust is and what we are all about. We were established in the year 2014 to support the growth of SMMEs across the country, specifically within the ICT sector, and if I may add, support the sustainable growth of SMMEs. We do this through our various programs, mainly under enterprise development, supply development, and a youth entrepreneurship program, while remaining firm in our ethos, which is to innovate, cultivate, and mentor SMMEs. This morning, I am joined by the lovely Boniwe Dunster, who is an HR practitioner with over 16 years of experience across various industries. She is also the founder of Blue Eagle Human Capital Practice that aims to simplify HR concepts and making HR advisory accessible to all. She is quite passionate about the empowerment of others and how we relate in the workspace, but I'll talk a little bit more about all that she does and how she does that. But as a viewer this morning, what you can expect is, as a business owner, what do you need to know when it comes to dealing with employees? We'll also be exploring the intricacies of contracts, the different types of contracts available for your employees and for yourself, and how do you actually manage these? We'll be looking at the different types of leave available as well and applicable to your staff and for yourself as a business owner. We'll also be looking at fairness in the workplace, managing incapacity and disputes, as well as terminations of contracts with or without the CCMA. Boniwe will get us a little bit more into details to what exactly this is all about, but it is employee relations training for you guys who have logged on this morning. I do encourage each and every one of you to please pop your questions in the Q&A box. It's at the bottom. And then any comments or any suggestions or any feedback that you would like to give, that you can throw into the chat box. We thank you very much for making the time once again to join us, taking the time out of your schedules to join us this morning. You will not regret it. We will be taking questions throughout the session, so please feel free to pop your questions in the Q&A box at any time of the session. We will answer most of the questions at the end of the training session, so please do stay online. We will address each and every question, well, we will try our utmost best. But for now, I'd like to hand over to Boniwe. Also, please feel free to engage with us on our social media platforms. Let us know how you're finding this webinar. What are your key takeaways? And if there is someone that will benefit from this, please feel free to share the registration link with them. They can still register and can still join. Boniwe, good morning. After my mouthful.
Good morning, Mandisa, and good morning to everybody that has joined this morning. And thank you most importantly to the Innovator Trust for actually trusting my capabilities to share my experience and to also upskill the entrepreneurs in this space in terms of how they generally would deal with people, right? And I'm going to share my screen. I do have a presentation that's going to guide our conversation. And as Mandisa has said, please post as many questions as you possibly can. We will take a few questions during the session itself. And then at the end, we will also allow, an opportunity with the last probably half an hour of the session for those people that want to come on record and ask their questions. So please feel free. And then let's learn from each other. All right. Can I get right into it, Mandisa?
Yes, please.
Thank you. So as indicated, today we're going to be talking about employee relations conversation, which really centers around people management. One thing about the business, you can have a business, you can have the best product, you can have the best, service, or whatever offering that you have, but what can make or break you is really the people around you. And most importantly, it's how you manage those people. And today I aim to impart you with the knowledge in terms of how to manage your people better, to eliminate issues, to eliminate, disagreements, or rather how to manage them effectively, and also try to minimize, the number of times that you go to the CCMA and settle, those disputes unnecessarily. So what you see in front of you is just a snapshot of an employee cycle, right? So in the tenure of any person under any contract, that you bring into your organization. You often first start by going through the recruitment process. Sometimes we call it, talent acquisition, and that goes as far as having to say, I've got a vacancy, I've got a job to be done, and I don't have the resources or people to fulfill the role, and therefore you go out there in the market and you recruit. And sometimes you do actually bring people on board through referrals, which is equally good. But I think having to follow the right recruitment process in terms of interviewing, background checks, and vettings becomes very critical, so that you know that the people that you're bringing on board are committed to your vision. They also have the right values as well. Secondly, it's the onboarding. How do you land your people in your organization? How do you welcome them on the first day? Are you prepared to receive them? Is the whole company prepared to receive them? Do you have tools of trade ready for them, whether it's a laptop, a desktop, a company cell phone, policies, contracts, anything that pertains to induction is important, so that the assimilation can be smooth. And then once that has been completed, then we go to performance management, which we will also get to talk about later. And this really talks about having a performance contract, those KPIs. Why have you hired a person? What do you want them to do? What are the standards that you want them to achieve those particular, KPIs? And most importantly, what do you do if you have somebody that is not performing, that is not pulling their weight, irrespective of having given them the training and the upskilling that is required to enable them to do their work? And then secondly, it's the learning, and the learning, it can be either formal or informal. The legislation is not really fixated about this, but, do you do on-the-job training? Are you sure that you give your people the right training to do the job, so that you don't have performance issues? Then we have your talent management, and this often happens in large organizations, but we also encourage small organizations to manage talent. If you realize someone is talent, if you realize that somebody, is an asset to your company, how do you develop them? How do you retain them? And last but not least, it's the exit management. And that's really around probably dismissals, which is the worst, or maybe resignations if an employee decides, that they have to, leave and they have found greener pastures. So in a simple context, this is how the employee life cycle looks like, right? A question or a point that is very important is, right, why is people management important? Like anything else that we manage in our lives, our personal relationships, romantic relationships, our relationships with our bankers, it is equally important for us to manage the people that we find in our spaces. Why we do that? Because it somehow provides structure in your organization. If things are haphazard, that it becomes impossible and difficult for you, to rein the situation in or to manage it. So it gives you structure and allows you a way on having to manage things with your people. Secondly, it also allows for efficiency and stable management and leadership, because if you have consistencies in the way that you manage things and you manage each and every person and situation, consistently, so it actually then, gives credibility to your leadership and gives credibility to your management team as an organization. And that in turn makes people to respect your organization too. It makes discipline easier. If you don't manage issues, if you don't manage people, and you let things, slide, or you sweep them under the carpet, trust you me, it will make it difficult for you to actually get to address serious matters when they arise. And hence it is important for you to manage your people from the beginning throughout their career tenure. And then it also minimizes disputes, because when there's challenges, people know who to go to in the organization. They know which policies and processes that they need to refer to, and the structures that you have internally. Again, one of my favorites is that when you manage your workforce very well, it fosters a harmonious employment relationship, which I believe as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, what you want at night is peaceful sleep. You don't want to lose sleep, because there is havoc in your organization. So we always want a harmonious working relationship whereby people can equally engage with each other respectfully. So, and it also helps you to, achieve your financial goals. So if you have less disputes, it means more money in terms of your bottom line. It means you also maybe spend less money on dispute interventions and so forth. So if you manage your people well, you actually then are contributing somehow to your bottom line. And lastly, it also enables employee engagement and you retain people. So if you're running an organization where you don't manage your people, you don't manage your processes and your systems, right, it might lead, to attrition. And we don't want that for you. We want you to run stable organizations where you can actually retain good talent so that you are able to grow in the respective spaces that you are in. Right? So I spoke earlier to say we're talking about employee relations training. And what is employee relations, or what is labor relations, as many people would actually refer to it as labor relations? I think there's just generally been an evolution of the terminology, but labor relations stems from 100 years ago, when it was just known around, trade unions, strikes and all of those things. But now with the era that we are in, we mainly talk about employee relations because why? We are managing an employment relationship, and that is between an employee and an employer, right? And we actually managing this relationship for the benefit of both parties, for an employee to have a meaningful career and for you as an employer to run a successful business. So as I said, it's mainly around the relationship in a work context that is predominantly, surrounded, or that is actually built around, the labor legislation around fair labor practices and equity. Right. And again, it encompasses of a few elements which I have spoken about. It's the relationship. Remember, when you hire someone into your organizations, there's two parties. There's you as an employer or as a line manager, and then there's the employee. So there is two parties. So a relationship, by virtue of bringing someone on board, there is a relationship that is existing that we need to foster and take care of. And then it pertains to a work environment, the premises where you work. And sometimes we know that people work in a hybrid model. Some people work 100% remote, but there is an environment that really, centers around that relationships. And then what are the processes that really surrounds, our relationships, and which is what we will unpack later on. And what structures do we have within the organizations and institutions, such as the CCMA, such as probably the bargaining council, if it's applicable in this particular sector, and any other structures that enables and support the employment relationship. So employee relation is about that. It's a relationship between two parties coming together, and it's actually a mutually beneficial one because one provides services or renders services, and the other one, compensates for the services being rendered or received by them. Right. And then the employment relationship, in South Africa encompasses, around a few elements, right? And it is governed by, the contract of employment. So it is very important for you guys to make sure that when you hire people, you do have an employment contract in place. And then we will also get to talk about that later. And it's also around the common law. It's also around the legislation that we have, and the legislation that we have predominantly around employment. We're talking about the Labor Relations Act. We're talking about the Employment Equity Act. We're talking about the Basic Conditions Act. We're talking about, minimum wage and so forth. So those are the types of legislations that we need to center our contracts and our structures around. Collective agreements, if we are in a unionized environment, and if not, then it will be with whatever collective bodies that you have with your employees, and also decisions around the labor courts and the labor appeal courts. As much as we have the legislation, we know that legislation and law is always open to interpretation, and sometimes that's why we find cases going to the CCMA, to the labor court, to the labor appeal court, and so forth, right? So whatever highest court that might have ruled on a particular matter, then that ruling actually needs to be incorporated into legislation and into practice. And I've actually spoken about these legislations just now when I mentioned them. So the Labor Relations Act is just generally the one that regulates, the organizational rights, between employees and employers, and, the different bodies. And the purpose thereof is to make sure that they advance economic development and social justice. And this applies to every employer and every worker in our country. So the minute that you say to someone, I'm bringing you on board to work for me, whether as a fixed term contractor, as a permanent contractor, as a casual worker, you are then need to operate within the confines of the Labor Relations Act. And then we go to the basic conditions of employment, which really gives effect to, to the basic rights that really enables fair labor practices. When you're talking about overtime, leave days, compensation pay, all of those things, they are actually included in the basic conditions of employment. And this legislation is very important because what it means by basic, it means that it's literally basic. It means that whatever that is contained in this particular legislation, you cannot give your employees anything less. So that is the basic and the minimum that you can provide. But if you want to be generous and give more, the law is more than happy for you to provide more. If they say your leave days it's 15 and you feel as company Boniwe Dunster that I want to give my employees 20 days versus the 15, that's perfectly fine. But what I cannot do, I cannot give my employees 10 days while the basic conditions, guides us to give people a minimum or a basic of 15 days. People that are excluded from this, obviously your independent contractors, which we will actually touch comprehensively later, and your volunteers and your self-employed people, they are not really included here. And then we've got the Employment Equity Act, which is very important, right? And this is really the legislation that helps us, to achieve equity in the workplace, giving fair treatment to employees, and making sure that we do away with discrimination within our workspaces. We also have occupational health and safety, and that's really about it. Is your building safe? Are the chairs and the tables that you're providing to your employees in good conditions? Do your people have the right level of lighting? Do they have running water? Can they go to the bathroom, right? Are the stairs properly working? When you have stairs, do the stairs have, handrails? If you're working in a high-risk area, mining, manufacturing, do your people have the right protective clothing and all of those things? So is your environment safe enough for anyone else to work in it? So these are some of the basic legislations. There's actually a lot. There's your minimum wage. There's your COWIDA around people that are injured. There's a whole lot, but these ones are very important. And if any of you here, you actually have office spaces, a physical office space, it's important for you to actually have those posters. I'm not sure if you've seen them or if you've heard about them. So you need to have the Labor Relations Act poster, the Basic Conditions of Employment poster, and the Employment Equity Act. The rest you can choose not to have. But employment equity, basic conditions are very, very important. So if a labor inspector was to randomly drop at your door, it is important for you to actually have those posters, and those posters should be put up where they are visible for people to see. So many people would actually put them just as you enter by receptions. Others will put it on the corridors, but just make sure you actually place them where your employees would be able to see them. Right. We've spoken about a contract of employment, right, which I had indicated that it's an agreement between, two parties, and it really provides around the terms and conditions of the employment relationship that is coming into existence or that has came into existence. One of the things that I need you guys to know is that if it happens for some odd reason that you and the person that you have brought on board, there isn't a hard copy or there isn't a copy at all, even a soft copy of an employment contract, that does not mean the employment relationship does not exist. So and a contract can also be tested as well between the two parties. Trust you me, there is a way that the chairperson, the commissioner, or the courts will be able to, establish the existence of an employment relationship. For example, do you go to work? Do you receive a salary? Do you ask for leave? Are you only dependent on that particular, employer, and so forth? So there are questions that will affirm for the parties that there is an employment relationship that exists. So do not believe that, or do not think that in an absence of a hard copy, then there isn't an employment contract in existence, right? And what should be included in the employment contract? There is a whole lot of details, but the basic is the commencement date of the employment relationship, the conditions of the contract. Is it a permanent or a full-time contract? Is it a fixed-term contract? Is it a casual contract? Is it a part-time contract? And all of those things. What are the working hours? Is it a 40-hour week? Is it a 45-hour week? Is it a 5-day week? Or is it a 6-day week? Obviously that will also filter in terms of what you're going to give in terms of your sick leave, which you will get that. So if you're working 5 days a week, you will actually get 30 days over a period of 3 years. And if it's 6 days, it will be 36 days and so forth. So those kind of detail are very important. Leave entitlements, the remuneration. Please don't give people contracts that do not indicate how much they earn, and then you somehow fluctuate the earnings of of your employees. And then provisions protecting the employer, such as confidentiality. It's important to include that as well, because you also want to protect your secrets as an organization. The termination of the contract of employment, it's important to include the notice period. What is your notice period? Is it 30 days? Is it 1 month calendar notice? And then we know that you can actually, have give 2 weeks notice if you've been there for more than 6 months and so forth. So those might seem as minor details, but believe you me, they are very important. When the time comes, when you're supposed to terminate that contract, or the other party or the employee wants to resign, and include any other terms and conditions, that might have been negotiated between the two parties, things that you agree on. It's important to try to avoid certain verbal agreements because they actually muddy the water. And then also the contract must clearly stipulate, as I indicated, what type of contract. Is it full-time, fixed-term, and so forth, because how you actually manage these contracts sometimes will differ. And then here are some of the contracts that we actually find. So when we're saying that you have a full-time contract or a permanent contract, that's predominantly a contract that means you hire me today as your employee, as Boniwe Dunster. It means that I'm going to work for you up until I go on retirement, whether my retirement age is 65 or it's 60. It means I will work for you up until that age. That's what a permanent contract means. It can only be terminated if I resign, or if I get dismissed, or for any other reason. Then the company restructures and then they retrench their people. So it means that you cannot just terminate me as and when you feel. It means that contract can only be terminated upon those reasons that I have just stated now. And then you've got a fixed term contract. And this fixed term contract really is around, it's a limited duration. Fixed term contract is actually a limited duration contract, which means that you hire me for 3 months, maybe because there's a specific project that you need me to work on, or probably there's a backlog of work that's left behind and you need to catch up. Maybe someone is on maternity leave and then you need a maternity leave cover, or for any other reason that you need a fixed term contract. The duration must be clearly stipulated. And if for any reason you decide to continue renewing the contract, you must actually have a valid reason in terms of why you are renewing the contract. One of the things that the labor legislation and the courts frown upon, they frown upon people that would continuously have people on fixed term contracts for 5-10 years and so forth, right? But we also understand that if we're operating on the SME space, sometimes it's not easy to give people permanent jobs, especially if we're not sure about the sustainability thereof or what's going to come, right? But just make sure that you have the right reasons why a person is a contractor and really not a permanent employee. And then we have an independent contractor, and an independent contractor is that it's independent of you as the company owner. It means that this person can do multiple jobs for multiple clients. They are not only reliant on you. And I do have a slide that will actually then talk to this just before we finish the presentation. So the independent contractor, it means they can work for multiple people. They are not your employee. You do not manage their time. They are not only economically dependent on you. You are not expected or liable to be giving them, tools of trade. They have their own laptops, company cell phones. They have their own workspace and so forth. They don't form part of your organizations. You don't necessarily have to be inviting them to anything if you don't want to, or if they don't want to come. Oftentimes, people bring independent contractors on board and then start treating them like fixed-term contractor. they need to ask for leave, they need to ask for sick leave, you need to give them a laptop and all of those things. Once you start doing that, you are actually moving into a more fixed term, more permanent, and that relationship now is managed through the employment legislation and not just, by contract law. And then we have what we call internships and learnerships and graduates. And these are contracts that normally come through, when you apply through INSETAs, to actually bring on board, learners or graduates so that you can impart the skills, or you can actually bring them on board as part of your plan on having to build, a pipeline for yourselves. These people should never be seen as your permanent employees. However, they are still also protected by the labor legislation. But we have seen in the past whereby companies, they bring these people on board and they treat them like full-time permanent employees, and they give them jobs, and they don't even have time in terms of upskilling. When you bring in a learner in your organization, it means that this person might not necessarily have the skill, but the intention is to give them the skill so that once the skill has been imparted and you've had them probably for a period of 12 months, then you can make them permanent. And the seasonal workers, we often find them in spaces where there's like seasonal work. We know, for example, with farmers, right? Farming is very seasonal. The construction type of work can also, be seasonal and so forth. And these people, they are also, governed by the labor legislation. As soon as somebody starts working for you for more than 24 hours in a month, then you have to manage them within the ambit of the labor legislation. And then I'm going to go through this slide, and I'll ask Mandisa if there are one or two questions that I need to answer. So as indicated, there is a difference between an employee, which is governed by the Labor Relations Act, and also an independent contractor. So what is the difference between the two? If a person is an employee, whether a permanent or a full-time employee, a fixed term contractor, and a seasonal worker that works for more than 24 hours in a month, those people are covered under the Labor Relations Act, right? So any labor legislation really, covers them, and any other issues or disputes that we have, we looked at it under the labor legislation. However, an independent contractor, as alluded not so long ago, they are not covered under the Labor Relations Act. So if there's a dispute between you and your independent contractor, that then becomes a contractual dispute and not an employment or a labor dispute. And a contractual dispute, you actually take it to the High Court. You don't actually take it to the CCMA, purely because those people are not your employees. I don't know if any of you would remember, there was a case with the SABC 8, I think more than 10 years ago, where they had those people were saying they were the employees of the SABC, and the SABC was saying, no, you are not our employees, you are an independent contractor. When they went to the CCMA and to the Labor Court, it was found that they were actually the employees of the SABC and not, they were not independent contractors, because they were purely only working for the SABC. They had their cameras and equipment were provided by the SABC. So the court ruled that those people were the employees. And there was another one with Kaya FM and Fed Joe, who Fed Joe actually took Kaya FM to the CCMA and later on to the Labor Court. He was claiming that he was an employee of Kaya FM, but the Labor Court ruled that no, you are not an employee of Kaya FM. You are an independent contractor. Yes, you work for Kaya FM, but after Kaya FM, you actually have other gigs. You actually have other work. You do other, social events and all of those things. And you have never asked Kaya FM for sick leave and all of those. So you are actually an independent contractor. So those are the two cases that are easily readable, when you want to distinguish in terms of what is an employee and what is an independent contractor. And then, like I said, their disputes are actually really dealt with differently, either at the CCMA or the Labor Court, or rather at the High Court, because it's a contractual issue. As an employee, you are economically dependent on a single income. If you employ me as company X, it means I only work for you. I come to your premises between 8 to 5 o'clock, Monday to Friday or Monday to Saturday. I don't do anything. I don't do work for other people as well. While as an independent contractor, you can have multiple clients. And then if you're an employee, fixed term or full time, the manner of work is subject to the control of the employer. How I do my work, when I do my work, and all of those things, they are in the control of the employer. My absence is also in the control of the employer. If I need time off, I go and ask for leave. If I am sick, I'm telling my employer that I'm not coming to work. And if I don't come to work for a certain number of days, it means I need to go to the doctor and I need to provide a sick note to my employer so that I'm eligible for the sick leave. But with an independent contractor, you don't have to do that. You can just say, client X, I'm not coming through today, and that's it. And you can maybe, depending on the relationship, you can say, you know what, I'm not feeling well and it's okay. And when you are absent, you're not going to get paid. Versus when you are an employee, you are on paid leave and paid sick leave at times, right? And then as an employee, you form part of the organization. And as an independent contractor, you're really not part of the organization. You're not even on their system. You don't even have an employee number. And then lastly, if you're an employee, the person is provided with tools of trade. I've indicated that the laptop, the cell phone, the papers, the printing, everything, your employer is responsible for providing you with the tools of trade, while with an independent contractor, people actually would bring on board their own tools of trade. So make sure that the people that you work with, you understand the types of contracts that you're bringing them on. Are they an employee or are they an independent contractor? You expect them to do a certain piece of work and they leave, or you call them when you need it, or you keep them on a retainer, but just get to understand the difference. Mandisa, any questions that I can take? I can take probably 2 questions.
Okay. We do have some. Thank you so much for that, Boniwe. I think it's quite crucial to understand the difference between the contracts. We have a question that speaks on fixed-term contract. Can an employee employed on a fixed-term contract, example 3 years, terminate contracts before term ends?
This is the employee that can terminate the contract?
Yeah, can an employee employed? Yeah. So can the employee terminate the contract before the term ends?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Remember that when they terminate the contract, they are essentially resigning, right? And the decision to resign is a unilateral decision. If I resign, I'm not resigning by agreement. I wouldn't ask permission from my employer to resign. So it is a unilateral decision for an employee to resign, which will lead into a termination of the contract. However, they would still need to actually serve their notice. And let's say probably they are more than a year with you, then you can actually hold them to a 1-month calendar month notice or a 30-day notice.
Okay, great. And then our second question, can I invest in paid training for graduates or learners and give them letters of intent to employ, either for a fixed term or a permanent contract? And what happens when the graduate resigns after signing training agreements?
Oh, that's a bit of a tricky one. Can you invest in their training? Definitely you can invest in their training, especially if, the intention is to actually grow and develop them so that, they can grow in your organization and then you can make them, permanent. You having to give them a letter of intent. What happens if that intent doesn't materialize? That's where I would be very wary of that, because a person can also claim that, you had actually created an expectation. And by you creating an expectation, there's, you then have to meet up to that, expectation. And for that reason, we actually avoid having to create any form of expectations. And not to digress, but similarly, to somebody that is a contractor, when a contract comes to end, they go to the CCMA and they claim that an expectation was created, right? Whether verbally or, otherwise. So we try to avoid you having to do that, having to create an expectation which might be difficult for you to fulfill. And then if you're saying you're going to be paying for their training and then you want them to pay you back, like there's a learning agreement of some sort, I would rather prefer that you have a learning agreement that stipulates that they need to complete the training for a period of 12 months or whatever program that you have them under. If it's an internship or a learnership, to say, we're having you for this particular period of time. And then should the person leave before the completion of that time, then they would be liable, to pay the variance or to actually, pay for the ad hoc expenses that might have been incurred. I would refrain from saying that because you have the intention of having to employ them, and then what if this time they are willing and waiting for that employment and you're the one that's not coming? But if it's an internship program, I have seen contracts where you can stipulate that they need to complete with the program for 12 months. Failure to do so, they will be liable for the costs that you have invested in them.
Thanks, Boniwe, for that. I think also just goes back to really, as the employer, managing expectations for both yourself and the employee. And just a last question, while we're on graduate programs and internships, is there a legal limit to the duration of an internship or graduate program within a single organization?
I think it depends on the programs and the incentives that you are working with. Graduate like learnership programs, they could be anything between 6 to 12 months, and internship programs, graduate programs, they can go up to 24 months, but you can't say to somebody they're on a graduate program or on a learnership for 5 years. What are they still learning for 5 years? They have learned the skill. So we need to also avoid having to exploit, that element of graduates. But anything up to 24 months, it's actually acceptable. I have seen some that goes up to 36 months, but it also depends on the complexity of the stream, or of the program that you're in. But you can put me as Boniwe on a learnership for 3 years as an HR graduate or an HR learner from a TVET college.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, our questions on contracts are increasing, but can we do just 2 more and then I'll let you carry on?
Okay.
How many times can a contract be renewed or extended? It's not specific what type of contract it is, but how many times can a contract be renewed or extended?
Ideally, you see contract extensions when people have fixed-term contracts. Try to avoid extending more than 3 times, right? If you do more than 3 times, it purely means that you are creating an expectation, and it means that the role that you continuously renewing, it's an important role in your organization. It means it forms part of your business structure and business continuity. And without that particular role, something is going to fall apart or certain things are not going to be achieved. Then somehow that role needs to be permanent because it is important to your operations. So when you renewing it so many times, it means it is important. When you go through the Labor Relations Act, there's an act that talks about the deeming provision. And the deeming provision, you actually end up being deemed as a permanent employee of that organization. And I can actually go to the CCMA and claim for missed benefits because, for example, if you have renewed me more than 3 times and I've been with you for 3-4 years, it means I'm missing on benefits like your medical aid and your pension fund, like your permanent employees. If you are giving performance bonuses to your employees, I do not participate because I am not part of your organization. So it's those things that a person gets to miss. And that is why when that deeming provision was actually reviewed or added onto the labor legislation, it was to try to avoid people being exploited, right? And employers moving away from giving the necessary benefits to the people. So limited to 3 if possible. Anything more than that, I might deem myself as an employee of yours.
Okay. And then Craig wants to know, do we pay UIF and pay AYE as per normal for independent contractors?
Definitely not. Definitely. Because when you take that accountability, you are actually saying, I'm your employer and you are my employee. So how you need to manage your independent contractors, they need to complete an invoice, give you an invoice, you pay them an invoice, and they get to sort out their own taxes, right? They need to sort out their own UIFs and everything else. Remember, UIF, it's an unemployment insurance fund. It's like your car insurance. You contribute into this particular fund so that should I be unemployed for whatever reason, whether it's maternity, disability, I can go claim for that because temporarily I'm unable to work or permanently so. So that is actually managed within the confines of the labor legislation. So your independent contractors stay away from doing their tax and all of those. They must send you an invoice, you pay the invoice, and that's how it ends. How they manage their finances is purely up to them.
Yeah, I think I just keep the boundaries clear. To all our attendees this morning, I would like to encourage you to please pop your questions in the Q&A box so that we're able to keep better track of them. I have noted this morning that the majority of the questions are coming through the chat box. So please be reminded of that. When we're over to you, I know we do have quite a bit to get through this morning, so you may continue.
Thank you so much, Mandisa, and thank you everybody for those questions. Right. So moving right along, we're talking about fairness in the employment relationship, right? So one of the things around employment relationships is that everybody has the right to fair labor practices, and that is per the South African, constitution, and that particular, clause in the constitution is the one that really has actually, made provision for a lot of the labor legislation that we have, And then again, when we're talking about fair labor practices, to terminate a contract of employment legally, according to the law, right? The employer needs to give the requisite notice in writing to the employee. And then we will actually get to talk about that later on. So if you are the employer and you are the one that's actually terminating the employment relationship, you need to give someone notice, and then there is a process to be followed, depending on the reasons why you are ending that employment relationship. Again, if you look there's only 3 grounds of dismissals in South Africa, and that is based on Section 88 of the Labor Relations Act. There's only three reasons, guys. We don't have 5 reasons or whatever number of reasons. We only have 3 reasons why an employee can be dismissed. First of all, it's the conduct of the employee. This is where we talk about misconduct, the breaking of the rule, or breaking of certain rights within the employment relationship. If somebody has stolen, if there's theft, there's dishonesty, there's misrepresentation, and abuse of sick leave and all of those things. So that is based on the conduct of the employee. So what that means is that you can dismiss an employee as that reason, number 1. Number 2, the capacity of the employee. Does the employee have the capacity to continue working for you? And there can only be 2. So it's either poor performance, when somebody does not meet their performance standards at all. So you have given them a performance contract, you have clearly stated out their KPIs, you have taken them to training, you have done on-the-job training, you have done job shadowing and given the skills and the tools, and yet a person is not performing. And then you do have, grounds, for dismissing that person. But even with that, there is a process to be followed, which we will unpack. Or ill health. If someone's health condition does not allow them to continue to work or render their services, then also following a process, you can dismiss those, But before you do that, the Employment Equity Act really says to employers, can you reasonably accommodate that particular person that is ill? Is there another job that they can do which is less strenuous or doesn't really, pose threat on their health? And then the third reason is really on operational requirements, commonly known as retrenchments. So those are the only 3 reasons in terms, or the only grounds that you can actually dismiss employees. It's, the conduct of the employee, number 1. Secondly, the capacity of the employee. And then thirdly, retrenchments, right? So those are they're very important. And those are the only 3 reasons. Other than those 3 reasons, trust you me, you have no reason at all having to dismiss anyone else. If anything outside this, trust you me, you will be found at fault with the CCMA or the labor courts. And then we actually refer to a code of good practice on dismissal. That is actually Schedule 8 of the Labor Relations Act. So when you're dismissing a person, it doesn't really have to be hostile, but there's a good practice that one has to follow. And if you get to look at this code of good practice, really, it deals with key aspects on dismissals on both incapacity and misconduct. And that's when it outlines the processes that you need to follow, and then the fair reasons for dismissals. Remember, your dismissals, they always have to be fair. There has to be a reason. The reason has to be fair. Like, it talks to the substantiveness of the dismissal. Why are you dismissing? Is there a rule? Was the rule broken? Is the rule consistently applied, and so forth? So there needs to be fair reason. Similarly to retrenchments, if you are retrenching people, your fair reason would be, you know what, you have not been sustainable as an organization in the past 3 years. You actually are running at a loss, and so forth and so forth. And therefore, you are having to reorganize yourself and restructure or retrench people. And that is a fair reason. Just avoid having to do things that do not have a fair reason supporting them, right? And the Schedule 8 also talks around the disciplinary procedures prior, to misconduct. We talk about progressive discipline. Have you given a written warning? Have you given a final written warning before you got to a dismissal? But also, that also depends on the type of misconduct. There are those ones that you can dismiss first time around, but there's certain behaviors that they believe that with progressive discipline and counseling, they can be corrected. Do you follow a fair procedure? When you dismiss someone, make sure that you dismiss someone with a fair hearing. You can never dismiss someone without a fair hearing. Was there a fair hearing? Did the person, get notice? Were the charges very clear? Did the person, was informed on time, on the date? Were they allowed representation? Were they allowed an interpreter? Were they allowed to present their case, to bring in witnesses, to also cross-question the witnesses of the employer? That are some of the fair procedures which we will also unpack. And the disciplinary records, are the disciplinary records that you've been keeping in place? One thing I know that we struggle with as people, as individuals, as entrepreneurs, is record keeping. And unfortunately, when you deal with people and you deal with employment relationships or employment disputes, record keeping is very critical. So that employment contract, those policies are very important. The warnings that you have given to those people are important. The performance counselings are important for you to document. You've taken them to training. It's very important that you keep record of that. So everything that you do with your employee, record keeping becomes very imperative, right? And then with the contracts, as I indicated earlier, in terms of terminations, right? So when you terminate contracts and when people are resigning, there's a notice period that is stipulated also in the basic conditions of employment and also in the Labor Relations Act, right? So if an employee has worked for you for less than 6 months, they need to give you 1 week notice. If they have been employed with you for more than 6 months, then they need to give you 2 weeks notice. And if they have been employed with you for more than a year, then they need to give you 1 month calendar notice or 4 weeks, right? They can never give you anything less than this, right? We often hear people saying, I'm resigning with immediate effect. I'm leaving now. The South African legislation does not have provisions for immediate resignations. It's not in our law. So it is important for people to actually give you that notice period. However, you as a line manager or as a business owner, you also need to discern, right? Do I still want to keep this person on? Is the person toxic? Will the person disrupt my workforce? What is the benefit of still keeping the person here? So if a person, for any reason, they might want to leave immediately and you are also comfortable with, then by agreement, then you can allow them to leave early. But make sure that you agree to say, if you leave today, I'm going to pay you up until today, and you want to leave with immediate effect, and we agree. But if you're saying you are waivering the notice period as the employer, it means that you say, you can stop today, I waiver your notice period, but I will pay you for the notice period. So just be careful around that. But there's a recent case that was at the Labor Appeal Court. This employee resigned, and instead of serving 1 month notice, served 2 weeks, and then went to join the new employer. And the old employer took the matter to CCMA and to the Labor Court. I think it went to the Labor Appeal Court. And in this instance, the Labor Appeal Court then ruled in favor of the employee because which actually, you see, hence I said the courts can also make our legislation. But the reason the Labor Appeal Court supported the employee said that, yes, I have resigned. My employer wanted me to keep me for long to do other jobs which were not part of my job, while the employer argued that they wanted the person to remain for handover. But the employee was able to prove that, no, it was not for handover. There are roles that have not been filled in the company, and the stuff that they want to they want me to do, it's stuff that's not within, that's really not within my scope. It's stuff that's needed to be done by, I think, an IT manager or, or something of that sort. And then the trust relationship and the environment was already hostile. And I don't know why they would actually still want to keep me. And the court in this instance, then they ruled in favor of the employee to say, you have had issues of not filling this role for, I don't know, it's over a year or 2 years. And then you're asking somebody to stay behind to do handover, but it's not handover, it's someone else's job. And, the environment was already hostile between the two. So why would you keep that? And hence I say that why would you also want to do the same? However, these are the timelines and the durations that the legislation really provides, right? And like I said earlier to the first question that Umandisa asked, that's on the chat around the notice period. The decision to resign, it's a unilateral decision. You decide as an individual that I want to leave. I want to resign. However, I need to inform you and I need to serve notice. But there's no way that an employer can say, no, you are not resigning. It's not their decision, right, at all. And then there's also terminations in a form of dismissals, right? And this would actually follow as a result of an inquiry, whether it's a disciplinary inquiry or an incapacity inquiry, which really talks around poor performance and misconduct. So with a summary dismissal, this applies to the cases of misconduct, and it will be on the day the employee is notified of the dismissal. So if you have charged someone with theft or dishonesty, and you go through the disciplinary process and you dismiss them today, maybe the hearing was on Monday, and then you get to dismiss them today. Summary dismissal says that on the day that you inform me of my dismissal, that is my last day, and your last day will be today on the 5th of October. However, dismissal with notice, it applies with incapacity cases such as ill health and poor performance, and also due to operational requirements, which is retrenchment. So if you take me through a poor performance inquiry and I'm dismissed because of my poor performance, then it's dismissal with notice. And then after I serve my notice, and then after that, I can only leave. And sometimes employers would say people can serve their notice from home. Same applies with ill health. And of course, with retrenchments as well, there is a process to be followed, which we will touch on later, but you always give people notice. It's only on summary dismissal, on misconduct cases, that people can be dismissed on the day that they get their dismissal letter after a disciplinary hearing. Never, ever, I can never repeat this again, never dismiss someone without an inquiry, guys. And then we're going over to the types of leave. So there's a number of leaves, and if possible, please amend your employment contracts to include some of these things. So we've got annual leave, which is actually covered for in section 20 of the basic conditions of employment. And this ideally means that you get 1 day for every 17 days worked. So you have 15 consecutive days essentially. And there I know with the first bullet, I says the employer must grant 21 consecutive days of annual leave, and with remuneration 21 days versus 15. The 15, it's the working days, but if you include the weekends, then it actually adds up to 21 days. And the employer must also grant annual leave not later than grant the annual leave not later than the 6 months after the end of the annual leave cycle. So the annual leave cycle runs every 12 months, right? So we often hear cases whereby employers just refuse to give people leave, and people have accumulated so much leave, but you can't do that. It's also unfair. And then leave must also be taken by agreement. It's also important for employees to understand that they need to ask for leave. They need to apply for it, and it needs to be agreed. And you need to take into consideration operational continuity and so forth. And then the family responsibility leave covered under section 27 of the basic conditions of employment. It's 3 days of paid leave. People have argued with me to say it's actually 5 days. It's actually 3 days. 5 days is, like I said, if you want to give more than the basic conditions, you're more than welcome. And a lot of employers normally provide 5 days for that. But minimum that you can provide, it's 3 days. And the employee must be in your employment for more than 4 months before they could be eligible for it. But guys, at management discretion, you can actually give it even before 4 months. If somebody was to lose their child or their partner, partner and all of those things, or their spouse, you can be compassionate and give it to them before 4 months. But generally, the law says the person must be in your employ for more than 4 months. And then the person must be in your employ at least 4 days a week. And also, one would also be eligible for this during when the employee's child is sick, and also in the events of death, your spouse, your life partner, parents, adoptive parents, if you are adopted, your grandparents, and that's your, your biological grandparents, your mother's your mother's parents or your father's parents, your child, adoptive children, and grandchildren. I know the question will come to say, are your in-laws included in this? This really depends on the employer. If you want to include in-laws as part of your provisions, as your EVP to your employees, you're more than welcome to. But legislation doesn't really make mention of in-laws, so you can refer to Section 27 there. And then we've got sick leave, right? Section 22. It says that you actually have 30 days for a 3-year period. So sick leave is for a 3-year period. If you want to give more, you can. So during the first 6 months of your employment, the employee is entitled to 1 day of paid sick leave for every 26 days work. And then after the 6 months, then your full 30 days can actually kick in. This is just somehow to try to avoid people having to misuse the sick leave. However, you can also, but people that work for 6 days a week, like Monday to Saturday, then they are eligible for 36 days of sick leave. And then we have maternity leave, which is under Section 25. And maternity leave, it's 4 consecutive months, right? So when a female employee is pregnant, they can actually commence their maternity leave 4 weeks before they give birth. But we know that a lot of females will try to work longer to as close as they give birth so that they can have more time at home. And if that is the reason, make sure that you ask your female employees to give you a medical certificate from their practitioner that states that they are still in a health condition to continue working, up until the later days, just to safeguard yourself. You want to avoid situations whereby people will give birth at work. And then they must actually also, give you a formal notice, preferably in writing, to say, I'm going to be going on maternity leave from this date to this date. And, when am I coming back, and all of those things. And then other employers, they actually give more than 4 months, but 4 months is what's normally given. And the 4 months can be paid or unpaid. It really depends on you as the employer, again, based on your value proposition, if you can also afford it. Small businesses often give unpaid leave because maybe they can't afford it. Some of them, they actually give, 50%. So it really depends on you. The legislation is very silent on whether you should pay or not. However, if you are not paying, then make sure that you're contributing to UIF so that your employees can actually go claim there. And then the employee cannot actually, if they want to come back early, they must actually say that in writing, and they can never come back earlier than 6 weeks, right? Even if they want to come back after a month, don't allow them. They must stay at home for 6 weeks as well. And if an employee miscarries in their 3rd trimester, so which is like above 6 months and they give birth to a stillborn, or they miscarry, then they're also entitled to 6 weeks of maternity leave as well. Right. And then parental leave. So you will realize that when I was speaking about the family responsibility leave, I didn't talk about paternity leave, right? So this would actually be covered under parental leave. So the legislation was updated, I think, around about 2019, 2018, with parental leave, because before it was not there. So the parental leave, it's 10 consecutive days for the other partner. So if a female employee takes maternity leave, it means the father of the child can take parental leave, which is 10 consecutive days. And it may commence on the day that the child is born, or if the child is also adopted, if maybe it's the 2 partners that are actually opting for adoption, right? And they must also then inform their employer in writing as well. And then we actually have adoption leave. I think adoption leave is actually also fairly new. It also came into effect when the legislation was updated then. So adoption leave, it's actually 10 it's 10 leave. What happens is that you would find that if you are adopting a child, the child must be below the age of 2, right, for one to be eligible for adoption leave. And then the employee may commence adoption leave on the day that the adoption order is granted. Alternatively, when the child is actually placed under your care, or it has been placed under your care by the courts. An employee must also notify the employer in writing that they are going to be taking adoption leave, right? And then I want to also make a correlation between adoption leave and parental leave, right? So what happens is that if there's two partners, whether in a partnership, marriage, or whatever form of union, you both decide that we are going to adopt a child. It means one of the parties will take the adoption leave for 10 days, and then the other will take the 10 days, right? So you can't both be applying for adoption leave. It doesn't apply like that. But I can tell you that there's a court case that's currently going on with a couple from Limpopo that's actually fighting with the courts that they must actually provide equal maternity benefits for both partners, but that's still ongoing. But as it stands right now, we're applying the maternity, the adoption leave, and the parental leave as well. And there's also then the commissioning of the parental leave, which is 10 weeks as well. So this is the employee may commence the commissioning leave on the day that the child is born, and the employee must inform the employer in writing. So the commissioning leave really talks around surrogates, right? So if you are having a child through a surrogate, then you will actually be taking, the commissioning leave. So by the date that maybe your child or the carrier of your child is going to give birth, then you can take that commissioning leave to take care of your newborn baby that was conceived through other methods, and that is actually 10 weeks as well. Right. And then we have, now we move into a different topic. We've covered all the types of leave. And then one thing that's very thorny for most employers is really around sick leave, which is the proof of incapacity, right? Sick notes. People often ask, when do we ask for sick notes, and when do we really give, sick notes, right? So an employee must produce a sick note. If the employer is asking for a sick note, then an employee has no choice but to actually give the employer the sick note if they were actually absent from work for more than 2 consecutive days, right? And if the employee has been sick in 2 occasions in that period of 8 weeks, the employee also needs to produce a sick note. So what this means is, if I'm off sick today on the 5th of October, maybe for 1 day or 2 days, and I don't give a sick note, which is all good and well. But again, on the 20th of November, which will be still within the 8-week period, so which means it's less than 2 months or 8 weeks, and I'm also absent again for 1 or 2 days, my employer has the right to actually say, you've actually been absent from work in 2 occasions in less than 8 weeks, and therefore I need a sick note. And that is well within your rights as an employer to request for that. I know employees can try to be smart and say, but no, it's less than 3 days or less than 2 consecutive days. But you can actually say, yes, but it's actually in 2 occasions in less than 8 months. So it means that you might have, a condition that's preventing you from coming to work as you're supposed to be, right? The question is, should the employee not produce the sick note? The employer is actually obliged to pay employee as per Section 22 of the Basic Conditions of Employment. Employees often think that sick leave is paid and they can abuse it. As the employer, you do have the prerogative, not to pay for that sick leave benefit. And I think it's important for you to inform and educate your team members around that, especially when they don't want to produce it. Oftentimes it's people, when you have trust issues, Boniwe is always sick, Boniwe is always taking time off after payday, after a long holiday, and all of those things, and all of those. So they need to provide that. And if they don't, it's well within your prerogative as the employer not to pay it, right? And the sick note must actually be from a registered medical practitioner or even, your traditional healers, they can actually provide sick notes, and you must actually accept them as an employer, but you must make sure that it's those traditional healers that are also registered within the right recognized body as well. And it can also be from, registered, nurses. I know people normally say sick notes from a clinic, a local clinic, a government clinic are not acceptable. They are, however, they cannot be booking people for more than 2 days. And again, it must be signed by a registered nurse who is registered with a professional council, which is normally the nursing council. And then the ordinary working hours. So we actually have normally people, as an employer, you cannot ask your people to work for you for more than 45 hours in any week. And by 45 hours, we mean normal working hours. Then we know that there is overtime in certain instances. So other people, they work 40-hour week. Some, they work 45-hour week. And then some people work for Monday to Friday. Other work from Monday to Saturday as well. And then it's 9 hours in any day if the employee works for 5 days or less, and 8 hours in any day if the employee works for more than 5 days a week. So also be careful of those details there. And then we have overtime, which is also another topic that is very contentious in our courts and all of those things, right? So overtime, it can only be worked by an employee on prior agreement. I think it's important when we need people to work for overtime, we get to ask, them to say, we actually have a backlog of whatever reason, I need people to work overtime on Monday or over the weekend. Let them know in advance and get into an agreement as well. There was a court order came out, I think, early this year, where an employee refused to work overtime, dismissed the employee. Employee took the matter to the CCMA. Matter later went to the labor court, and the employee said the employee was well within their rights. As an employer, you need to actually ask, get permission and negotiate it first. But sometimes I know as managers or as employers, we often want to just give instructions and for people to take. So sometimes it's just the tact and the manner in which you talk to your people as well. And I think in this instance, it was really around, the approach that was used. But just make sure that you ask people so that people know, so that people can make necessary arrangements with their families and other commitments that they might have, right? And then you may not require your employee to work overtime for more than 10 hours a week, guys. I've seen instances whereby people work 15 to 20 hours of overtime a week. That's literally killing people. But people also do it because they also want money. So just be sure that you actually manage your overtime well. And then an employer may not also require employee to work more than 12 hours a day, because we actually have shifts, 6 to 6, and all of those things. Just make sure it's not more than that. And then an employer must pay an employee at least 1.5 times employee's wage for overtime. And if the employee normally works on a Saturday, it will also be that. But if an employee is working overtime on a Sunday, on a public holiday, it must be double the wage. But if an employee normally works on, if it's on the days that they're working at, it's 1.5. But public holidays and Sundays, they would normally be at double rate, right? And this must actually be in agreement. There's certain instances where employees say to employers to employees to say that maybe I'm not going to be paying you overtime because of money or otherwise, but I'm going to give you time off, right? So if you don't pay the person in cash, then you can agree that you can rather give them time off. And that also, you must let them know so that they're not expecting money while you're actually giving them time off. And then another thing that's important for us is actually to have a disciplinary code for every organization, big or small. A disciplinary code is very important because it allows you to actually set the standards in terms of how people should conduct themselves within this employment, relationship. It actually allows you to outline the processes to be followed should there be issues or should people contravene any of your working standards, right? And then secondly, a disciplinary action may be taken where misconduct has occurred as indicated earlier. And if an employee commits a misconduct outside of a workplace, right, but you find that that particular incident is closely related to work, you have the responsibility to actually take disciplinary action against that person. For example, if somebody uh, assaults someone at a year-end function that is somewhere at a farm or at Mahalis where we're all having fun, you are expected to take action against that employee because the incident took place, during a work function. So your rules, they still apply during that point in time as well. And then, the purposes of a disciplinary code, as indicated, you need to provide clarity, which is very important. It gives guidelines and procedures so that we really don't get to deviate and we are actually fair and consistent in the way that we actually apply our practices. And thirdly, provide an indication as to the seriousness of the offenses that are okay. So you need to make sure that you've got a matrix of offenses. What are the serious offenses, less serious offenses, and what is likely to be, the outcome of that? Is it a disciplinary hearing, which comes with a final written warning, or a dismissal? Yes, that might be a guide, but you need to actually have that guide, and you need to make sure all of those, they actually also get to align with Schedule 8 of good practice, as I have alluded before. And the most important thing is really your substantiveness in terms of your discipline and the consistency that you apply. Mandisa, can I just take 2 questions just in the interest of time, but I just want to see what's going on the chat.
Okay, yes, sure. We can do 2 questions. This is regarding people working shifts. One works Monday to Thursday and the other works Friday to Sunday. What happens when the public holiday falls on a Sunday? Does the one who works on the Sunday get the benefit of it?
Of the public holiday?
Yeah.
Yes, they do get it. And if they do, then if you actually expect them to work, then you'll actually have to compensate them as such. So yes.
Okay. Just off the back of that, will they then decide whether actually they would like to work and then they agree with the employer that they'll be compensated for that, or they just take the public holiday?
There needs to be a conversation, because remember, business continuity is important. So the line manager or the owner will actually need to plan to say, this is a public holiday. What does this mean? Similarly, I'll make a typical example. If somebody is a Christian and they're going for Good Friday or Easter, it's something that's very important to them. But you also need to make sure that your business, continues. Do you get somebody that's on standby to come and work, or get another person? So you actually need to plan ahead on it as the business owner with the employee as well. So just don't shock each other on the date of the public holiday.
Okay, cool. And then, can a salary be reduced due to incapacity?
Hey, that's a tough question. Yes, it can be. I'll tell you why. If it happens that due to incapacity and as part of reasonable accommodation, right? So it means that you have been moved from the role that you were having and to another lesser role, right? Yes, it's not your fault. So we would call it a no fault, situation. So, and maybe you move from being senior HR manager and they actually moving me to probably frontline as a receptionist and stuff like that. There might be conversations around how to structure your your remuneration and your income. So that can actually happen as part of reasonable accommodation.
And again, I guess it's to have the discussion with the employee and reach agreement.
Definitely. Okay. So, and again, to your point, remember that a salary or an income, it's a term and condition of employment. So it means that as an employer, you cannot unilaterally change that without a consultation. Similarly, if you're actually having to move an employee from one role to another due to incapacity, there would have been a process, an incapacity process followed, right? Either a person would have been sick for a certain period of time, they've been unable to do their work. There would be medical reports from practitioners indicating the type of job, including an occupational therapist, in terms what kind of job is the person able to do, and the person is always involved in that. So it's you do it together. You cannot unilaterally say, as company X, I'm moving you from this to this because of incapacity. We have to converse. We need to actually agree. I will actually probably have a new performance contract and role and so forth. So it cannot be a one-way or a unilateral decision. Definitely with consultation. Salary is very sensitive, guys. We can't touch them without people being aware.
Okay, got you. I will hand over to you to continue. We do have quite a few questions, but yeah, we'll get to them towards the end.
Cool. Great. I've spoken earlier around the 3 reasons to dismiss employees, which is misconduct, incapacity, or operational requirements, and all of those things, they actually come out with fairness, right? And when you actually taking the matter to the CCMA or to the labor court, they actually look at the fairness process. Remember, I said everybody has the right to fair labor practices, so they will actually get to look at substantive fairness and procedural fairness, right? And substantive fairness is really around, does the rule exist, right? You can't discipline for someone for a rule that does not exist, or is the reason that you're dismissing someone, is it a practice that is commonly known and that is commonly practiced, right? Was the rule broken by the employee? Was the employee also aware of the rule or of the practice or of the conduct? However, if it is if, for example, we are looking at a poor performance case, right? Does the performance standards exist? Because oftentimes people are saying you're a poor performer, but there's no KPIs or a performance contract. There are no performance standards that have been set. So where do those performance standards come from? So you need to set those up front. And also, if it's ill health, it's important for you to conduct an investigation to the extent and the nature of the illness. So if the person has been off sick and they've got medical notes, or rather medical reports from the practitioner, you might actually also want to validate that through your second opinion doctor. And then you might actually want to see, to what extent are you able to accommodate this person. And there are environments where you find that you can't accommodate a certain health condition. And it's in such, you might actually then need to terminate due to incapacity for ill health, right? And whatever that you do, make sure it is always consistently applied. And that is the substantiveness there also. This is around fairness. This is around procedures. This is around rules and all of those things. So when it comes to procedural fairness, when you are having a disciplinary hearing, right, you need to make sure that an employee is given 48-hour notice minimum. You can't give less. It needs to be 48 hours. You can give 72 hours. It's good. You can give a week. It's also good, but at least 48 hours. And that does not include days in which the employee does not work. If the employee does not work on weekends, you can't give them a notice on Friday and expect them to pitch for a hearing on Monday. It needs to be within the 48 hours of the working days that they normally work. Right? The employee advised in writing. It's important to give charges in writing and not verbally. And in your writing, you need to include the date, the time, the venue of the hearing. If possible, include the name of the chairperson that's going to be presiding over the disciplinary hearing, and the right to representation. A person can be represented by their fellow employee or a union rep if they do belong to a union. They have a right to state their case. They have a right to bring in witnesses and to also cross-question the weaknesses of the employer. And they also have a right to an interpreter if they want. We have seen cases whereby employers would refuse an interpreter and say, no, we use English as business language and therefore you don't need an interpreter. That is procedurally unfair. Psychologically, it has been proven that when you are under stress and when you are under pressure, it's much easier for you to express yourself in a comfortable language or your mother tongue. So do not take away that right. And should you do that, a person might just keep quiet, continue, take the matter to the CCMA for unfair labor practice. And as such, you might actually have to settle due to procedure. We've spoken about the incapacity due to poor performance. As I said, performance standards are important. Performance contracts are important. So make sure that, you do not also mix the two, incapacity for poor performance and misconduct. We have a habit of managers that would actually rather discipline you for misconduct instead of a poor performance. The issue is the issue is poor performance, but they choose the misconduct route because misconduct is much quicker. Because with performance management, it actually requires time, right? So you must make sure that the performance standards are clearly set out and communicated and signed if possible, and also identify and understand the cause of poor performance. So meaning, does the person maybe lack the right experience? does the person need training? Maybe they don't have the right tools to do their work, and also give them an opportunity to actually, let you know what their issues are. Right, there must be a common understanding in terms of how you're going to to change this, how you're going to help the person to actually improve their performance, and you need to get that commitment from the employee. And failure to do that, then you are well within your rights to take them to an incapacity inquiry due to poor performance, and that can actually lead to a potential dismissal. So the table there at the end really clearly outlines the process for you. So you need to have that counseling session, which is the meeting where you call person A into the meeting to say, person A, I have seen a drop in your performance, or you have not been meeting your performance standards. What is the issue? And they explain. If they are explaining, some of them you'd find maybe they're dealing with issues that you don't know of, personal issues. Sometimes you find that it's work issues, so that you can actually be able to establish the right method to put in place, right? And then once you have had that counseling meeting, you agree that you're going to have regular performance meeting for a set period, whether it's for 6 weeks, 8 weeks, depending what your policy says. And then every week, every meeting, you actually check in. What has been going on? What support do you need? Have you met the targets? Have you not met the targets? And why for that period? At the end of that period, then you can end the performance process. If the employee has improved, we close it off. We continue. We're all happy. If it happens that the person doesn't improve after the interventions that you have put in place, and then you can actually also consider extending it maybe for an additional 4 weeks. And if not, and there's still not improvement, that's where you then convene a poor performance inquiry, and you still need to get a chairperson for that. And the other rights that I've spoken about in terms of procedural fairness, they will still apply. And then what happens is that the presiding officer will actually look at what is presented in terms of your evidence, what you have done as the employer to support the person. Do you have a contract where the standards set? And if it is found that as the employer, you have done all of that, chances are then the presiding officer will rule or with the dismissal, right, and terminate the employment contract due to incapacity. If a person is not performing, you can't just decide to dismiss them without following process, right? And that really takes us to why it is important for you to have performance contracts, as indicated, earlier. It allows you to manage, the working relationship and the deliverables very well. So you hold people to the KPIs and the objectives and the goals that we have agreed on during the commencement of the employment relationship, or commencement of the performance year, and you need to make sure that what you put in there also gets to align with what you want to achieve as an organization as well, right? And when you have a performance contract, it empowers you as a line manager to hold someone accountable. You can't come to me and say, Boniwe, you are not meeting your performance standards, your performance has dropped, it's poor. Boniwe is going to ask you, what performance contract? Where is the performance contract? Where is the performance standards, right? And it makes it difficult for you to do anything. So I think we need to be proactive and put things in place so that we are able to manage such things quickly when they when they okay, right? And it also allows you to give objective feedback to the employee, so you don't have to fluff around in terms of performance ratings, performance feedback and all of those things if you have a performance contract in place. So try by all means. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to detail everything, but you need to provide high level things, how they're supposed to be done. Yes, they would be ad hoc things, but just make sure the core of your KPIs are there and they are actually signed. Even when you want to provide bonuses and increases, that can actually be informed by the performance of the employee based on the performance contracts, right? And then another one is really around the ill health. I think it will talk to the question that we had earlier, around having to move someone from one role to the other, right? So incapacity as well, you can actually dismiss someone due to the fact that they are not able to do their job. And incapacity sometimes can be temporary, sometimes it can be permanent. So for example, if you have a driver and you find that maybe their leg has been amputated or their arm has been amputated, or maybe they have they have an eyesight issue, that is a permanent, ill health or a permanent condition. And as such, a person can never continue to drive. So if your environment allows, you can move them to something else. If they not, then you might have to permanently off-board them or put them on permanent, disability. But it's important for you to have the right documentation that supports why the reason of terminating that employee. And you still need to actually do that within the confines of the legislation. So make sure that you keep all the records, all the reports, and all the conversations pertaining to you having to move that person as well. Like I said, it's important that you look for reasonable accommodation. Where can we move this person? What role can they do where they don't have to use their hand or their foot, or a role that can actually accommodate a partially blind person and so forth. So those are really important. And when you actually having a conversation or those meetings of incapacity inquiry, make sure that you actually follow the right process and have the right people in the conversation, and that the line manager, that would be the employee themselves, their representative as well. And if they do have, like, they belong to a union, include them as well. So don't blindside anyone in terms of this process, because the CCMA might actually deem this to be an unfair process. And then the last reason around dismissals, we've spoken about misconduct, we've spoken about incapacity. The last one is really around retrenchments, right? Which is commonly known as retrenchments, but per legislation, we call it operational requirements. And this you would actually find under Section 189 of the Labor Relations Act. And with the retrenchments, right, it can actually occur under the following circumstances. It could be economic. Like I said, you are not making money, you are not sustainable, you don't have clients anymore, the business is reducing, so that's economical. It's a fair reason for you to restructure and reduce people. Technological, if maybe you have bought new machines and then you need lesser people, and the less people and the other people, you are unable to accommodate them, or you are unable to upskill them into something else, you can. Structural, if you want to maybe flatten your structure for optimization, it's a fair reason, or any other reason as well. Those are the reasons in which a company can be able to restructure, right? And when an employer contemplates dismissing employees based on operational requirements, or they contemplate on retrenching, it is important to consult. You can never retrench people without a consultation process. That's what we will deem as unfair retrenchment, right? So it is important for you to make sure that you consult with the people that are impacted, because when you're contemplating retrenchments, you know which areas you're going to touch, which roles and why, or people that are impacted. And those are the people that you need to consult with. However, if there's a workplace forum, you will engage with the workplace forum committee. If they belong to the union, then you will actually consult with their union representatives on that. And remember, it is important, your choice of words is important. When you actually are going through this, you're not going to say, I am retrenching. No, you are not retrenching, you are contemplating. And that's why you are inviting people into a consultation, so that we can together consult and see how we can meaningfully, look at this thing, and maybe we can come up with a different solution. So never say I'm retrenching. You need to say, I am contemplating retrenchments or contemplating dismissals due to operational requirements. And for such, I am consulting with this group of people. They are the impacted people. This is why we are doing it, and allow them into the conversation, and for them to be able to give you options and so forth, right? And the employer and other consulting parties that would actually join this, this conversation, the reason is to actually engage in a consensus-seeking process, and obviously an attempt to always, limit the number of people impacted, right? Or reach some kind of an agreement in terms of how to work on it. So the reason you're actually engaging with this consultation is to see if there's a possibility of avoiding dismissals. You can limit the number of people being dismissed. You can change the timing of your dismissals, right? And also mitigate the adverse effects on the dismissals. And you can't do that alone without having to engage with the impacted people as well. So that is very important, right? And then you need to make sure that you actually write a comprehensive, business case. And that really allows you to actually keep records in terms of that. So what are the reasons for your dismissals? What the dismissals now being retrenchments? What alternatives are there? Can you upskill people? Can you retrain people? Can you reduce maybe the working days or, the working hours as well? How many people are impacted? How many people have been impacted by the similar process in your space? The severance package that you're going to be paying, is it 1 week as per legislation? Are you giving them more? And the assistance that you can provide to people that are impacted and all of those things. So you need to actually have, I don't know how many pages, but you need to have a document of some sort that includes these things so that people can go reflect. And should you be taken, on review to the CCMA, then you actually have your business case that you would have shared, and that stipulates the reasons for your retrenchment. And if it's financial, just be prepared and be vulnerable enough, because you might to a certain extent be asked by the consulting parties, including the CCMA or the labor court, in terms of disclosing your financials as well. Right, as we actually get to the latter parts of this, managing employee disputes, like I said, even with retrenchments, employees are likely to maybe sometimes take this to the CCMA, especially if they feel that the process was actually unfair, was subjective, or it was not followed as it's supposed to be, right? But with any other disputes, especially internally, you need to actually have a grievance process that you would actually follow if an employee is being aggrieved by a certain behavior in the workspace, right? And a grievance is actually an informal, and it's also an internal process that really allows you to resolve your matters in-house. It's a home affairs thing, right? And then there's progressive discipline. And progressive discipline, that's one that really also includes counselings. You believe that a certain behavior can be corrected with the right discipline. For example, if it's late coming, you're not going to dismiss someone for late coming on first instance, right? But you actually talk to them and say, you know what, you can't afford to come late. These are the consequences. These are our working hours. Please adhere to those, ask for reasons and all of those things. Then you can give a verbal warning. If it happens again, you can give a written warning. Happens again, you can give a final written warning. And eventually, if the behavior still doesn't change, then you can take a person to a disciplinary inquiry, which might lead to a dismissal due to late coming. It's a behavioral issue. However, if it is a major misconduct, like I said, dishonesty, theft, misrepresentation, and assault, those ones, they will go straight into an inquiry, and they might actually lead to first time dismissal. So if there's an assault issue, you're not going to give someone a written warning for assault. So just understand which matters are for progressive disciplines and which ones would actually be taken over to a disciplinary hearing in first instance. And that's why I was saying it is important for you as entrepreneurs and as business owners to have a matrix of offenses that would actually get to give you a guide against these things, right? And then some companies, once they have dismissed, they would have an internal appeal process. They get another, chairperson to actually just go through the matter and hopefully to come out to a different conclusion. However, even if you don't have your own internal process appeal, it's still okay. The person can actually take the matter to the CCMA directly, but make sure you also inform them that, you know what, you have been dismissed. You can take the matter to the CCMA if you wish to, and you actually have maybe 30 days for you to refer an unfair dismissal or whatever unfair labor practice that is to the CCMA. So also advise them on the relevant timelines of the CCMA. Right. And the CCMA actually plays a very crucial role in the employment relationship, right? And the main objective thereof is to resolve disputes between employees and employers, and that's their aim. They actually want to make sure that, you don't, go beyond that. If something can be resolved, the CCMA is there to mediate, right? And it doesn't have to be only dismissal issues. There are other issues as well that you feel that if you can't manage them internally, then you can actually request for the services of the CCMA, which actually come at no cost, right? And they normally try to resolve most of their disputes informally, which is through the conciliation process. And the conciliation process is predominantly the meeting of the minds. So the mediator will try to talk to the parties in terms of what can be done, what can we compromise? How do we actually meet each other, halfway? So it's informal. And if the arbitrator or the mediator find that there is no meeting of the minds at conciliation, nobody wants to actually, compromise, then the matter might go into arbitration. And one thing about arbitration, you need to know it's formal, unlike the conciliation, which is informal. Arbitration is formal and it's binding, right? The outcome or the award thereof, it's binding. If the arbitrator says reinstatement, if the arbitrator said you need to maybe give a settlement and all of those, that award is binding. Alternatively, whoever that's, unhappy, then they can take the matter on review to the higher court. But we know the challenges that we have with the high courts at the moment. We don't have enough lawyers. We don't have enough courtrooms. So we actually have a backlog of cases that are sitting there as well. Right. So there's conciliation and there's arbitration, and there's also a process called the con-up. So the con-up simply means that the conciliation and the arbitration will actually take place more or less at the same time. So you actually have the conciliation, and then if you guys don't agree on anything, you immediately move into arbitration at the same time. But we see a lot of people having to object to this. They would want to have a conciliation. If it fails, then they would actually want another day for the arbitration, right? And yeah, I've actually spoken about the mandatory functions of the CCMA, and primarily they need to resolve workplace disputes, and those people have actually been trained to do that. They facilitate conversations, they help people to actually handle issues, even if it's with strikes, lockouts, and so forth. They are there to actually do that. So use their services if needed, and just know that their services are actually for free as well, right? And the matters that are referred to the CCMA, your unfair dismissals, your unfair labor practices, they can actually be taken to the CCMA as well. And your unfair discrimination matters, the CCMA is well equipped to deal with such, but the timelines are very important, right? So like I said, it's 30 days if you're referring an unfair dismissal from the date of dismissal. And and if it happens that your employee, for example, doesn't do it within the 30 days, maybe they do it on the 40th day or whatever number of day, they actually need to apply for condonation, which they're actually asking the CCMA to actually condone their matter, to allow their matter to still proceed. They will apply for that with whatever fair reasons that they will provide. If it's an unfair labor practice, then they have 90 days to refer the matter. And then those days, the 30 days and the 90 days, you start counting the day after the incident, and you include weekends. So if I'm dismissed today, I start counting day one tomorrow, and the 30 days and the 90 days includes all the weekends as well, and the last day thereof. And here it's just like a list of policies that I would advise that you guys would have, you might need to have. There's a whole lot more, but these are some of the policies that I would advise that you need to have: your code of good practice, your disciplinary code, grievance procedure. Sexual harassment is very important, and there has been a code of good practice released on this. Your leave policy, compensation and benefits, probation if you are applying probation in your spaces, your communication, so that you avoid people going to speak to your media on your behalf and you haven't given them the mandate, performance management, retirement policy, recruitment and selection. HIV and AIDS is actually, I need to update that into probably like a health and safety policy that encompasses all other things pertaining to that. Workplace tools. So if you have your laptops, cell phones, and all of those, you need to have a policy around that. Exit policy. How do you manage terminations? If you have company vehicle and all of those. So these are some of the policies that you might want to consider to have, to manage your issues, right? And that's about it. Here I actually have an activity of some sort. If we were in a classroom setting, we would actually do some activities. So yeah, that's it from my side as far as I could share with you in terms of what is important. Mandisa, thank you so much. If you can just help me with some of the questions that I need to answer.
Of course. Boniwe, thank you very much for the presentation. you've truly taken a business function that seems so complex if if you don't know the details of HR, and truly just simplified it for us this morning. We do have quite a bit of questions. I'm going to start with the dismissal process and disciplinary codes that you mentioned. There was a question earlier on, I think it was in the chat box, I can't seem to find it now, where they were asking if you've dismissed an employee due to theft or fraud, and now they want to come back into your organization, what would that process look like?
Come back in what sense? You want to employ them again?
Yes.
Why would you employ a thief? You dismiss them for a reason.
Yeah.
Honestly.
And I guess I guess in that instance, again, it's a communication or communicating between the two parties, and understanding what you're getting yourself into.
Sure.
Yeah.
And maybe let me also answer that. Let me just, first of all, like to my point, why would you want to bring a thief back into your organization? What did you lose due to their behavior? Number one. Number two, it also goes back to your recruitment process and your vetting and your background, right? Do you actually do background checks in terms like if it is a returning employee, you need to go back to your records and find out why they left in the first place, right? And then if it was a normal resignation, you can always bring them back. But if it was for a dismissal, then we can actually then also question, your code of conduct, what do your own values say as an organization, and what precedents are you actually also setting up for future? So hence I said that's a very tricky one.
So just really assess the risk. And also say, similar to that question, if an employee gives you a short notice that they now want to leave or they're resigning, what is the process? I know you mentioned earlier on that you can't stop them from leaving, but however, the notice they're giving you is not according to your codes or your processes.
Yeah. So in that, like I said, like resignation is a unilateral decision. You can't stop people from resigning. However, as per your employment contract, which will actually include the notice period, you actually need to hold them to that notice period. And it also should be for good reason. You want them to do a handover and all of those things. If they don't want to, you can actually hold them to it. And alternatively, you might actually get them to actually pay for the notice period that they didn't, work for you. So if they're saying, I'm not working your notice period, to say, okay, why? And try to come to some sort of agreement, and their reasons, but not you. They can actually ask them to pay you your notice period. Similarly, the law to a certain extent, or the legislation rather to a certain extent, can be fair, because they're also not saying to you as an employer, you can't retrench without a process, and you can't retrench without notice, or you can't dismiss someone for incapacity without notice. Equally so, as employees, we need to also be fair as well, right? And that's why they say you need to work that 30 days notice. If not, then you actually are liable to pay your employer for the time that you did not work. So you can claim that money from them from them to pay you back. It might be a lengthy process because it might include the lawyers, but that could be your recourse. But just see if you can't get to a mutual separation agreement of some sort, just so to try to actually, still manage the relationship and people can live amicably.
Okay. And I guess that's the beauty of the policies that you were taking us to this morning, that in essence, they truly protect both the employer and the employee. And it's meant to work for all parties involved. Okay.
Definitely.
Our next question, in the case where an employee stops coming to work for over 3 weeks and you follow up as an employer to no avail, what should the employer do in this case?
3 weeks is very long.
Almost a month.
That's where I'll start, right? So what's important is that employees, they also need to know that they have a responsibility towards this employment relationship. So if someone is not coming to work, they need to inform you as the employer. However, if they don't inform you as the employer, you as a responsible employer, that is, you can actually, nothing's stopping you from calling Boniwe to find out, Boniwe, where are you, right? And then if you have good record keeping, your records would actually have Boniwe's next of kin. You can also contact Boniwe's next of kin, right? If you're unable to get hold of Boniwe's next of kin, you can actually send what is this, a postal order to Boniwe, around, because you need to also, because remember, chances are for that long, you might actually dismiss the person, right? But you need to demonstrate what you have done as a responsible employer. So call the person, keep record of that, text the person, keep record of that, try to get hold of the next of kin. If not, send a postal order to Boniwe and an email to Boniwe as well, right? And if Boniwe still is not coming back, right, then you can actually invite Boniwe, because that's actually absence from work without permission. It's essentially you have absconded from your work, and then you can actually invite Boniwe to a disciplinary hearing. Just make sure you send the charges through a registered mail, rather, right? A registered mail, and get confirmation that the mail was received, and then invite for the whatever particular date. And then on that date, when you have that date, then you will have your disciplinary hearing on what, depending on what your charges are, whether your charges are absence without permission or it's abscondment, right? And if Boniwe does not pitch on the day, you can still continue and have a hearing in Boniwe's absentia, because you've invited Boniwe, you've made attempts to get hold of Boniwe, you've sent a registered mail which was signed, so you are sure that Boniwe received that particular mail, and then you dismiss Boniwe, right? And then process the termination, stop the salaries and everything else. Boniwe will resurrect at some point when Boniwe sees that there's no salary coming in, or they want to claim for their pension fund. But don't leave it for 3 weeks. It's too long. Manage it very quickly, because in 3 weeks, it's loss of money. It means you're going to be paying Boniwe, because you also can't stop Boniwe's salary without actually having a valid reason to do that, because what if you stop Boniwe's salary and you only find out that Boniwe was involved in a car accident and she's in ICU? That's why you also might need, to make that effort as an employer.
Gotcha. Thank you for that. Piwe, I hope that answers your question. And if it doesn't, please feel free to pop a follow-up question in the Q&A box. Humozo also has a question. What do we do as an employer when the employee does not want to sign the warning letter?
So if the employee does not want to sign the warning letter, you call someone else in the building to witness that you are giving the warning to that particular employee, and get that witness to actually sign as a witness, and that warning is valid. The fact that Boniwe doesn't want to sign it doesn't mean it's invalid, but just get a witness who would be present to say, I'm giving Boniwe a warning. Boniwe doesn't want to sign. Can you please sign as a witness? And that witness clearly means that you witnessed Boniwe not wanting to accept the warning, and that warning will actually hold as well.
Okay, great. If an employee has a drinking problem, is it the employer's duty to make sure that he goes for an AA program?
You guys are asking tough questions. So, first of all, you actually need to have that conversation with the employee, right? Obviously, this would be as a result of their behavior. And if you do have a wellness program in your organization, then you can actually refer them to that, wellness program. If you don't have wellness program, you can actually then allow them an opportunity to find a program for themselves, or to take time off to actually get to manage their condition. But what you cannot do as an employer, you cannot ignore it, because in certain instances, it comes out as a wellness issue. So what are you doing? What would you do if Boniwe was sick? So sometimes they look at it as an illness of some sort. So it is important to converse around it and to agree with the person, for them to agree that they have a problem, and then they will go out and actually then find help. And what does that help look like? And what intervals will you have with the employee to check on the progress thereof? If you can refer them to something that it's even better, because you have more control over it. But if not, but then by counseling, by conversation, and by a person's admission, then they will actually have to go seek help for themselves. But what you can't do is just to ignore the matter.
And I guess what I'm also gathering, Boniwe, from these questions and how you address them so well, is that an employer has a responsibility to a certain extent to intervene in the issues that are arising with their employees. And I think that's just dismissing them without having offered a lending hand or help of sorts is actually unlawful.
Definitely. And that's why you would hear during my presentation, I kept on saying responsible employer, responsible employer. So that was intentional, because by you having to own a company and have people working for you, there is a certain level of responsibility that you have.
Yeah, for sure. What happens when you employ someone and they do not disclose that they are pregnant while on probation period?
I actually had a call this morning on this by someone.
Well, here it is again.
All right. So, guys, if a person doesn't disclose that they are pregnant, there is literally nothing that you can do about it, and it's also not your business. Remember, you are hiring and recruiting a person for their skill and for their competency, and that's why we have the legislation such as the employment equity. The reason is to also protect people from being discriminated for such things, right? And because if you have an issue with the person not disclosing, it means that chances are you are going to discriminate them because of that condition. So you literally cannot. And even if you're interviewing someone and you see that the tummy is big, guys, you can see the person is not saying, and you can see this person is about to give birth any minute. You can't even ask that question. You can't. You can't. You can assume that she's pregnant, but you can't do anything else, because it's a discriminatory question. The question is, are you going to ask the next candidate who has a flat stomach that they are pregnant or not? So stay away from it. If they don't disclose, they didn't disclose. And chances are, or not chances, people do not disclose because they are continuously being discriminated because they are pregnant. And remember, pregnancy, it's not an illness and it's not a disability of any form or shape. And people have missed employment opportunities purely because they are pregnant. So it's a discriminatory question. You can't ask it. And whatever decision that you make in terms of who you hire, it must not be found that the reason you did not hire candidate X was because they are pregnant.
Sure. Okay.
Discrimination. You could face the might of the law.
Sure. What happens in the case where an employee is underperforming, even after numerous training sessions and mentoring? However, they still feel overwhelmed by work and therefore underperforming. How do I, as an employer, provide assistance?
So I would believe that by the sound of the question, you have already provided assistance in terms of training, giving them the right tools, coaching and mentoring, and and so forth. Just make sure that you document all the efforts that you're putting in place, and you also document what they say their challenges are. And despite the interventions that you have put in place, if they are still not performing, then you need to take them to an incapacity for poor performance. Alternatively, you can actually even get to demote them as well. But there's a process. So when you go to that incapacity, inquiry, you can, short of dismissal, what you can do is that you can demote a person to a lesser role because of poor performance. Because sometimes you find that it could be a mismatch or a misfit, right? But if you move them to another role, then they can actually then perform. So it's well within your right, with everything that you've put in place, to take them through that inquiry. If there are alternatives such as demotion, you can actually apply them. If there isn't anything, unfortunately, you might have to dismiss them due to poor performance.
Sure, I got you. And on dismissal, or rather on demotion, if you are demoting an employee, does the salary also have to be reduced?
Yes, because unfortunately, because now the role has also changed. You can't justify a person keeping them on that particular salary, but they're doing a lesser job. The reason they got that in the first place was because either of the promotion or increased responsibilities. Now the responsibilities and the accountabilities will also lessen.
Okay. I do want to remind our attendees online that we still have 5 more minutes, so you're still welcome to pop your questions into the Q&A box while we go through the last 3 that we have here. Yeah. Another question is, does the company pay for background checks for the employee, or does the government cover those fees?
The company or who?
Or the government?
No. The company pays. You pay. They are your costs, right? Your MIEs, your LexisNexis, and all of those things. Every employer will actually incur those costs. What must not happen? You mustn't ask employees to cover their own background checks.
Yeah, that was just my follow-up to confirm that in no instance should an employee cover their own background check cost.
Yes.
Okay. And then this is a follow-up question from a question that we addressed earlier on with the two employees who are working shifts, one being Monday to Thursday, the other being Friday to Sunday. And what would happen in the instance where there's a public holiday on the Sunday? Do they still need to come into work? The follow-up question to that is, does the other one also get a public holiday then?
Who's this? Which one? The one that doesn't really work on the day?
Sunday, yeah. The one that had worked then Monday to Thursday, would they also get a holiday? Because the other one now is working Friday to Sunday, is entitled to a public holiday because their shift falls on a public holiday.
I'm not sure I understand. So you mean the one that's working so the one that works Monday to Thursday, and another one from Friday to Sunday. Okay. So which one is getting a holiday? The one that's working on a Sunday, right?
Yes.
Yes. And your question is,
does the other one also get the public holiday? So I'm not sure how that would work because their shift does not fall on a public holiday.
Doesn't fall on a public holiday. It would not really be applicable because it's not their working day.
It's not their working day.
I hope I'm answering this correctly. And if not, please do also, please do clarify.
Yeah, we hope we answer that correctly, Keda. And if not, please do feel free to pop a follow-up question. But from what I'm understanding, yeah, the other one would not get the public holiday because their shift doesn't fall on the public holiday. Okay. And then Pure wants to know the forms that are relevant for HR. Is there a storage area where we can download these?
Yeah, there is. Yeah. Can I send that to you, Mandisa, and then you can share with everybody else? I think I have, I do actually have something here that I can share with you, then you can share with your people.
That would be great. You can send that through to us and we'll just, excuse me, package and circulate that together with the recording of the session, guys. We will be packaging that and making it available on our YouTube channel. So please make sure that you are following us on YouTube and be on the lookout for that. And then our last two questions. Can you convene a poor performance inquiry after 4 months of employee joining when contract states probation is 3 months?
So I'd be interested to know what happened in the 3 months of probation.
That is now not happening in the 4th month.
What often happens with employers rather, or line managers, they avoid having to manage the probation period. So if your employment contracts have a probation clause, make sure you follow that probation clause. So for example, check up on your person every month, make sure that they actually have their KPIs or scorecards for that 3 months, clearly articulate to them what is it that you're going to measure during that 3 months. And at the end of the 3 months, you need to let them know that you have successfully completed your probation period, or you haven't. If you haven't, then of course we will actually go through, the incapacity process, because I suspect on the 4th month, it means that you didn't conclude your probation period, because if the probation period was concluded successfully at the end of the 3 months, does that mean now that they are permanent, they are starting to slack, right? But if then that is the case, let's assume you followed it. If that is the case, then you actually then address it. So it's important for you to address performance immediately as it occurs. But just be careful that you don't do anything with the probation period and then come later and actually want to apply it, or come later and say you are poorly performing while you actually let me work up until the 4th month. Because automatically, if you don't say anything at the end of the probation period, the assumption and the conclusion is that you are comfortably happy with my work.
Got you. And also, while we are on the 3 months probation period, is 3 months a fair amount of time for probation?
Yeah, it is. I think it depends on the role and the job and the seniority of the job. So 3 months is what that's standard in many contracts. But if it's a senior position or a complex position, it can actually go to 6 months, but nothing more than that. But 3 months, it's fairly okay. It's fairly acceptable.
Yeah, 3 months fair, nothing more than 6 months. And then for those people who are having chronic illnesses, is it advisable to disclose your sickness to your employer?
The legislation doesn't really mandate people to disclose, or people, they actually disclose on preference. If they are comfortable to do that, they can. And again, it goes back to the pregnancy issue. People have lost jobs because they thought that it is important for me to disclose that I have a chronic illness. I pick medication up from the clinic, or I go for whatever checks every month and all of those things, and people lose their jobs. So it's a very tricky situation. It's a catch-22, and it's a very fine line. I believe that if you're in an organization that would want to encourage people to disclose, which we do encourage people to disclose, just make sure that your processes and your maturity level in the organization, it's good enough to be able to absorb having to hear that. There was a talk where somebody, I think that I did 3-4 months ago, somebody said, I think they did interviews. I'm not sure if it was online or anything else. It was a reception job, but she was bent here on the neck. So she's got a scar. I think she got bent with water or whatever. When they saw that she had that, she lost the job because the employer felt that I can't have somebody with a scar on my front line. Similarly, on the same situation, somebody disclosed that I think they also pick up their chronic medication at the clinic once a month, and they were told that unfortunately we can't hire you because we can't have people that are taking half a day or 3 hours every month to go pick up their medication. So hence I said the maturity level in your organization must be good. We do encourage people to disclose so that employers, they know, what's happening, so that they can support people in their organization as well. But we find that people do still get discriminated against these disclosures.
Sure. Yeah. So by law, they are not compelled to do so. However, it could work in their favor. Yeah.
But it's in their favor. But again, it also depends also in terms of the kind of job, because there's certain jobs that you might need to disclose. If you are a driver, you can't not disclose that you are partially blind, right? If you're a forklift driver, you can't keep quiet that you might have a backache and stuff like that. So it really depends. If it has no bearing on the job, then you can't. But I think people have actually been done bad by their dishonesty. But I encourage people generally to disclose so that the relationship can start on a positive footing, so that you know what you are working with as the employer, so that the employer can be able to put in the right level of support in place for you as well. But there are those challenges that unfortunately we still face as a country.
Sure. Okay. We do have some clarity on our public holiday question. And he says, let's say Heritage Day, September 24th, was on a Sunday, but usually people who work a 5 days a week job, Monday to Friday, they get Monday as the public holiday. So I was just checking if the Monday to Friday person would also get a public holiday, given that the Friday to Sunday person gets it.
Is it here on the chat? Can I read it myself?
Yeah.
Is it on the Q&A or on the chat?
It's in the
Q&A. So it says, let's say Heritage Days on the 24th of September was on a Sunday, like it was now. But usually people who work 5 days a week, Monday to Friday, they get the Monday public holidays, which is all good, yes. So I was just checking if the Monday to Friday person would get a public holiday, given that the Friday to Sundays person gets it. Yes. Remember, the public holiday is for everyone, so they would still get the public holiday.
Okay, perfect. That does bring us to the end of our webinar, which was Employee Relations Training this morning. Extremely insightful, Boniwe. Thank you. That was Boniwe from Blue Eagle Human Capital. In case you are looking for her online, I'm assuming that they can find you on social platforms.
They can, I think, let me just check here. I think I have my social platforms on some of these slides here. Yeah, I do. So on social media, I think on LinkedIn and all of those. Yeah. Okay, I didn't include them here. So on LinkedIn, I'm Boniwe Dunster. On Instagram, I'm Boniwe, your HR specialist, also Boniwe Dunster. TikTok, Boniwe Dunster. Twitter, it's Dunster_Boniwe. I think those are the 4 major ones. I think I go by my name. I go by my name on all of them.
Yeah. Okay, just in case any of our viewers this morning would like to engage you further in any areas that they would like to dive deep into, Boniwe is available on the following contacts that she's placed on the screen. And to all of you, thank you so much once again for making the time to join us this morning and engaging with us. It was extremely insightful for everybody. Thank you very much, Boniwe. You were amazing. Thank you. And thank you to the team. And that is it from me this morning.
Thank you so much.